I do seminars all over the country. Kind of grew up with one of my best friends and guys that I work a lot with is Al Linder, and I worked with In Fisherman and Linder Media Productions for a lot of years. But one of the things that we do, especially for Steve and Danny up here, is to make sure that you have a good trip because you're going to catch some fish. One of the things that we do is we do jig fish a lot. And I think that a lot of people get dialed into these different things about using all these different kinds of rigs, and that's why I put a little pile of jigs on each table, and these are actually the jigs that we use. You can look at my rods, and I had a trip here last Thursday and I pulled 2 or 3 jig rods out of my boat just to show you that I never changed anything, and these are actually the color and the jigs that we use. And we had a great day. We caught about 25 or 26 walleyes and a bunch of big perch, but we jig fished. And this time of the year when the water is a little bit warmer than it was a month ago, a lot of people are right now into this fact that, you know, I need to be fishing the weeds and the weed line, and that's not a bad idea. But the problem is the walleyes don't agree with you, and they're out a little deeper right now. Some of the depths that you might be looking are 11 to 14 feet and as deep as 20 feet. And what we're doing is we're looking for, I look for rocks. I like to look for rock humps. And, you know, it sounds easy because I know the lake, but, you know, you look at the map and you go over on that east side, up by Edgewater and Island View and stuff like that, and all these little rock humps, there's about to the other, to the other, to the other. And sometimes I see the fish on my graph, and sometimes I don't. But sometimes I'll see bait fish. I'll see little clouds of bait fish, and if I see that, I'll fish the spot. But what do you think is the biggest mistake that most people do when they go to a spot? What's the biggest mistake that they do? They stay too long. 15 feet and less, the wind can change and really affect the fishing. So what you got to do is just make sure that you get up on these rock humps and try them. And all you do is basically, in fact, I'll grab this rod I had a customer use, and I'll pass this around. But this is a 1/4 ounce jig, and it catches everything. We caught, you know, perch up to 12 inches. We caught walleyes up to 20 inches. We got plenty of northerns, but it's a nice outfit to get bit. You don't need a leader. You know, and I think that's another thing with jig fishing. A lot of people want to use a leader, or they snap and swivel, and they want to do all this stuff. If you look at my stuff, it's very simple. You just tie it on the line, and you jig fish. And, you know, I've taught thousands of people how to fish a jig, and it's not very hard. But just remember, this is a piece of lead. That's all this is a chunk of lead. And if you don't put some type of movement into it, it's not going to do anything at all. So we're using jig and minnow. And if I'm using a crawler right now, a night crawler on a jig or a spinner, I'm only using half. I'm only using a half a crawler because we wind up getting bit better, and we actually hook up with the fish better with a half a piece of crawler than a whole one. Now if I'm fishing a slip sinker rig, which I'll show you, then I use a whole crawler. And, you know, it makes a big difference. So I think if you fish at home and you fish a little differently than what I'm telling you, I totally respect that. But here, this is what we do. And, you know, I'm not sharing, grab that for me for a second. I'm not sharing any big secret deal for it, you know, that I'm giving up. But this is stuff that we like to do. One of the things about jig fishing, I won't set the hook in you, I promise.
Sure? I think that's part of the joke, isn't it?
I've told the truth many times, but there's times when I don't. But anyway, what you want to do is when you cast it out, you know, a lot of people have this bad habit is they keep the rod too high. And when you jig fish, you want this rod right out in front of you. You want it in front of you. Because when you want to tighten up and set the hook, you know, you want it here. You don't want it up here. Because if you look at where I'm setting the hook from down in front of me, I'll say I was going to really pull on this to set the hook. It's right in front of me, and I've got all this room to set the hook and tighten up. All right? If I go like this, and I'm fishing up high, up here, how am I going to set the hook? I mean, I'm ran out of room. I don't have the room. So you want to keep that rod basically in front of you when you're going to go set the hook. Now, when we jig fish, we kind of drift, or we use the electric, and we kind of, but you got to pop this thing. Just pop it twice. I always tell everybody, pop it 2 times. Pop, pop, let it sit. Pop, pop, let it sit. but don't get the rod up in the air. Keep it out in front of you. And when you get a bite on a jig, usually, all it is like you're pulling a sock through the water. All it is the fish comes up. As the jig goes up and comes down, what happens is they kind of grab it as it comes down. And then they'll sit there with it. And then it's just a momentarily, they'll sit there with it. And all of a sudden you feel something, you just watch that rod tip, and you could just feel a little bit of fish hanging on the end of it. Especially when you're fishing out in the open in rocks or off the drop. If you're in weeds, then it's a whole different story. You got to kind of pay more attention. But what happens is all they do is load up that rod tip. They just load it up where it just bends a little bit, and that's when you want to set the hook. Just hold on, I won't hurt you. And you just want to, just set the hook firm. You know, this stuff on TV, Roland Martin, and I mean, they set the hook. It looks like they're coming out of their shoes. These hooks are so sharp nowadays that you really don't have to do that. Just a nice firm set, and you'll get the fish almost every time. I think too many people pull the hook away from the fish. But I'm going to pass this around so you can actually see the color of the jigs that we use. I like something with a little bit of color, orange or chartreuse or a combination of both. I tried to give as many people as I could this one jig color called Parrot, and it's got a little bit of orange on the tip of it, and these work really, really well. So, is there any questions about jig fishing? Yeah. Just pop, let it sit. Pop, let it sit. It's just a pop. It's just with your wrist, It's just pop, not this stuff, I mean, I've had people where you gotta say, whoa, slow down. I mean, people are like, they're like this, These fish don't wear gym shoes,
Have you cast out, or are you fishing by the boat?
No, if I'm drifting, okay, the boat is drifting sideways with the wind, I'll throw it out maybe 10 yards or so, 15 yards, so you've got an angle. You always got to remember, the more wind you've got, the heavier jig you got to use. And then you can fish closer to the boat. You don't want to have an 1/8 ounce jig out with a 20-mile-an-hour wind and 15 feet of water, because you'll never get down to the bottom. Or you'll have so much line out, you'll never feel a bite. So I would say on this lake, I don't ever use more than a 1/4 ounce jig. Very, very seldom. And if the wind, like we got, comes up right now, what I would probably do is I'd probably go to maybe even a 3/8 if I was drifting. But most often a 1/4 is more than enough. That's what this is, a 1/4 ounce jig. I gave everybody kind of a mix of 1/4s and 1/8s. When you don't have a lot of wind, I like an 1/8 ounce jig. I showed you that color, and then I'll pass this one around too. This one's a kind of a green, kind of a brighter green with a red eye on it. If you ever notice the water, when you get away from Lakewood Lodge, if you get out in the lake itself, the water's got a little more color to it. You notice that? I mean, it's not real clear. So I like to use something with a little color in it, and it really helps. A little bit of orange. And some of the guys that have been up here go, if I put orange on, I'm going to catch the northerns are going to be attracted to it. Don't always think that way. We like stuff that's a little bit more colorful on this lake because we get more bites. And I think that when we dial into this and we say, well, I'm here only to catch walleyes. Well, it's a tough lake to say I'm only going to catch walleyes. It's a lake that you catch a lot of different kinds of fish. And the nice thing is they're all salvageable. Whether they're northern pike and they're small, but the limit's 9. You got nice walleyes here, you got big jumbo perch, and then the crappies are going to start to bite here pretty quick. So.